Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou. And no, you did not click on the wrong video. This is the Your Season is Over video. And don't worry, we're going to get to the point in laughing here in just a few minutes. But I did want to come on at the start of the video here and say something. And this isn't a troll job or a skit or something like I sometimes do at the beginning of the videos. This is just us talking here. The college football regular season ended yesterday, right? We're moving forward now to conference championship games coming up this weekend. We've then got the entire slate of bowl games, college football playoffs, ending with the national championship game on January 20th. I sat around watching these college football games yesterday, and it reminded me, one of the reasons anyway, of why college football is the greatest sport in this country and has the greatest regular season of any sport in this country. So much of the focus of college football over the last 10 years, really, but now with the expanded playoff, it seems to be more hyper-focused, is on the playoffs. And, I'm just as much a part of that problem as everybody else is. Even in the offseason, when we talk about teams, one of the first things we talk about is their chances to make the playoffs. And then, the season comes around, and every time they lose a game, we're like, oh, well, does this mean they can't make the playoffs? And if a team's got 2 losses, we're like, oh, no, they can't lose another game or they won't make the playoffs. And everything just becomes so hyper-focused on the postseason or playoffs. And I watched 2 days of college football, Friday and Saturday, like a lot of you did. And I watched team after team that have absolutely no chance of making the college football playoff. In some cases, I watched teams play that have no chance of even making a bowl game. And you would never know it by just flipping that game on and watching it. I'm going to use one game in particular as an example, but this applies to literally dozens of games over the last 2 days involving teams that weren't playing for a bid to a conference championship game. They weren't playing for their playoff lives. They weren't on the bubble and needed a big win to get in. They literally had nothing to play for other than winning the game yesterday or Friday or whatever the day was. Somebody calling Uncle Lou there. They're going to have to wait. But the Florida State game yesterday. Now, this is the Your Season is Over video, and so we have spent an inordinate amount of time every Sunday this season pointing and laughing at Florida State about how bad they are. And we're going to do that again today in just a few minutes here. But I watched that game yesterday, and the stadium was sold out. The fans went absolutely nuts from pregame to the last second ticked off the clock. I thought the players played as hard as they did in week 1 or week 5, or if it were a playoff game. If you just woke up from a coma and turned that game on yesterday, you would have no idea that what you were actually watching was 2 teams who had horrifically disappointing seasons compared to fan base expectations in the offseason. One team who has already fired their coach. One fan base who is threatening to burn down their own campus because their school won't fire their head coach. You would never know that watching that game. And this applies to a lot of other games. North Carolina, NC State, Southern Cal, UCLA. You turn these games on, and they're rivalry games. The players are playing to win. The coaches are coaching to win. The fans, disappointed though they may be with how their team's season has played out, showed up to the game. And in most cases, the West Coast is a separate animal in terms of attendance, but you get the point I'm making. You turn these games on, and you would never know that in some cases you were watching a 3-win team, a 4-win team, a team without a coaching staff. One team, Florida, who basically announced they were hiring a coach yesterday that the fan base is totally against and threatening an all-out revolt, wanting to burn the administrative building to the ground because they're hiring a coach that fan base. You would have no idea any of that was going on if you would have been in a coma and you woke up and you just turned on one of those games. And that's why we love college football. That's why college football is the best sport, I think, on the planet. It's got the best regular season of any sport in this country for sure, by far. And it's not even close. And I bring all that up, and I mention all that to remind myself, I'm mainly talking to myself here, but to remind everyone that's listening that it's not all about the playoffs. That is a goal, and that is most teams' goal. There are plenty of other reasons to watch and love college football that don't involve the playoffs. There's just the love and passion you have for your school or your team. You've grown up in a lot of cases rooting for this team, pulling for this team. You had a lot of rivalry games yesterday where, again, doesn't matter if you're looking at 3, 4, 5 win teams. These are rival teams, rival fans that want to win this game, whether their teams were 11-0 heading into that game or whether they were 0-11 heading into that game. You'd never know it by turning it on. And I want us to be careful that we don't get to a point as fans, and again, I'm talking mostly to myself here. I'm not pointing any fingers. I want us to be careful that we don't get to a point as a college football fan base where we get to that all we care about is the playoffs and nothing else matters. That is why we don't watch other sports in a lot of cases, especially regular season. I talk about this all the time. I love the college basketball NCAA tournament thing. I think their regular season's a waste of time. You can go 0-30 in the regular season in college basketball, win 4 or 5 games in a row in your conference tournament, and you get in. It's just an irrelevant regular season. The NFL in a lot of cases, and I know a lot of people watch the NFL and love the NFL, but a lot of passionate, diehard college fans, one of the reasons they have fallen in love with college football over the years, as opposed maybe to the NFL, is because of the importance of the regular season. And I feel like we're getting to a point where we are so obsessed over the playoff and does our team get in or not? And if they do, what seed will they get? Will they get a bye? If they don't get a bye, will they get a first round playoff game? Will they be ranked 8th or 9th? You know, if they're 8th, they get a home game. If they're 9th, they got to go on the road. And I'm not saying none of that matters. Of course that matters. If your team is in the playoffs, all of those things matter. But I don't want to get to a point where that's all that matters. The regular season in college football is still unbelievable. I watched the Florida State game yesterday just as intently as I watched the Alabama-Auburn game, or the Georgia Tech game, or the Texas A&M game, the Miami Pitt game, whatever. And you can make the argument that the Florida State game, like those players gave more in that game, which quote unquote didn't matter, than in some of the games that did. And I don't want us to get to a point where we forsake the regular season because we're so hyper focused on the postseason. And some of that is unavoidable because of the expanded playoff, because of the emphasis that TV networks have put on the postseason. And honestly, because of the emphasis that some administrations, head coaches, and fans have put on it, we're partly to blame too, I guess. The schools, I think, are partly to blame. You've got schools now firing coaches specifically because they didn't make the playoff. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. And, as a fan, you might be glad that your school fired your head coach specifically for not making the playoffs. I don't know. I just don't want us to get to a point where we forget that, especially if you're my age. I fell in love with college football in the 80s and 90s. We didn't even have a championship game. I mean, we didn't even have a BCS that was matching like 1 versus 2 in a poll against each other at the end. We had nothing. And then we had the BCS, which is 1 versus 2. And then we had the 4-team playoff, and now we have the 12-team playoff. And I don't want us to get to a point where we forget why we fell in love with college football to begin with, which is because I'm a Georgia fan and I want to beat the shit out of Georgia Tech at the end of the year. Right? Or because I'm a Florida fan and I want to beat Florida State at the end of the year. If I'm a Florida fan, do I wish Florida was headed to the playoffs? Yeah. Does that mean I want to beat Florida State less? I hope not. I hope not. It's getting to the point where it looks like it's going to start impacting scheduling. You've got 2 different coaches of 2 different teams who are making like the same argument on two different sides of the same coin. Like Miami and Texas. Texas is 9-3, likely not headed to the playoffs. Sarkisian, basically in a press conference, is saying, look, if we wouldn't have scheduled Ohio State, we'd be going to the playoffs. I guess we should just schedule Eastern Michigan instead of playing these big non-con games, because they, of course, lost to Ohio State. Takes no responsibility for the loss to Florida, by the way, but just specifically wants to point out to you and everyone else that, hey, if we just stop scheduling the Ohio States of the world, we'd be in the playoffs right now. Not saying that he's right or wrong. That's not my point. Then you look at Miami. You have Miami saying we should stop scheduling these big non-con games. We're 10-2, and we're not going to the playoffs because we beat our big non-con opponent. So in one case, you've got Miami, who won their big non-con game at the beginning of the year. They beat Notre Dame, saying, I guess that doesn't matter because we've got the same record as Notre Dame and we're ranked behind them. So what was the benefit in us playing Notre Dame? We beat them. We got the same record. We're still ranked behind them. I guess we shouldn't schedule these games anymore. Then you got Texas, who lost their big non-con game, making the exact same argument, but for the opposite reason. So whether you win or lose the big non-con game at the beginning of the year, you've got coaches, administrators, fans even coming out and saying, why schedule the big non-con games? And again, while I understand both of those arguments, and in some cases may even agree, specifically with the Notre Dame argument, I stop scheduling Notre Dame. I'm all for that. But it's an example of the larger point I'm trying to make here, which is the regular season in college football is sacred. And I feel, just hearing what y'all say, reading what y'all say in the comments, hearing what you say on the call-in shows year round, by the way. And again, I'm pointing myself to, I'm guilty of this too. I make playoff videos in April. Who could make the playoffs next year? It's April. Like we haven't played any games. So I'm part of the problem too. And I don't want us as a fan base to get to a point where we have so watered down the regular season that we're just another sport. Where, you got these 10 or 12 regular season games, but they're not that important. They don't really matter. We don't need to watch. We're not scheduling non-con games anymore. We're just waiting until December to see who the playoffs, and then we'll watch that. I don't want it to become that. I don't think we're close to becoming that. That's not what I'm saying, but I feel that I feel the wind's blowing that direction. And I don't think any of us want that as fans. I have always considered myself to be a college football fan with a favorite team as opposed to a fan of a certain team. I mean, am I a Georgia fan? Yeah. But bigger and more important to me than that is I'm a fan of college football. And I'm just as big of a fan of week 1, week 5, and week 12, and week 14, and rivalry week as I am of conference championship games, the playoffs, or the Citrus Bowl. And I don't want to see any of that go away. But anyway, that's my public service announcement. Take it for what it's worth. Troll me, whatever. That's how I feel. Now, let's do some pointing and laughing, shall we? Rivalry week in the books. And so it's the 2025 college football regular season, and I've been harping on a point over the last few weeks. I'm going to reiterate it now. Yes, the regular season is over. The college football season is not over. It's not even almost over. We have 7 more weeks of the college football season. So just kind of to put that in perspective, we just ended week 14. Whoever your favorite team is, think about who they played way back in week 7. And think about how long ago that was. That's how much longer we have to go. 7 more weeks. We've got conference championship games, of course, coming up on Friday and Saturday. And we'll talk about some of those today in a little bit. And then we'll talk about them, of course, a ton in detail throughout the week. And then we've got bowl games. Of course, the first round of the playoffs is on December 19th and 20th. Second round of playoffs and bowl games are on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And you got bowl games that whole week there between Christmas and New Year's. The semifinals or the Final Four is on, January 8th or 9th, 10th, something like that. And then the national championship game coming up around January 20th. So we still got a lot of time left to the end of the college football season. Now, there will be games every week. Army, Navy, by the way, coming up in a couple of weeks too. So we still have a lot of time left in the college football season, but it is true that each week we will have less games than we normally have. But still a ton of college football to go. I'm going to be here for it. I know you will too. But today, we're focusing on the list of losers. That's right. It was rivalry weekend. And just like every weekend in college football, half the teams that play, well, they have to lose. There's no ties in college football anymore. So we've got an amazing list of woozies over on the Your Season is Over wall. Yes, I know Florida won yesterday. And congratulations. That was a good win. I think I'm keeping Florida and Florida State over there for the significant future. I'll make a determination on how long some point later. But Florida and Florida State are staying over there for a while. They're just terrible teams, terrible programs. Both have terrible administrations. And the fans don't even disagree with me anymore on any of that. Scott Strickland's going to have to hire bodyguards. They're going to burn his house down. Florida State has completely given up on football. They won't fire Norvell. The fans have had it up to here, the whole deal. So the fans don't even disagree with me. So you shouldn't really have a problem with me leaving you over there. We'll talk more about that game, of course, coming up here in just a few minutes. But rivalry weekend in the books. And I'm not going to harp on it much other than what I said in the beginning of the video. There were great games this weekend, a lot of which involving teams that have no significant postseason to play for. In some cases, no postseason at all to play for. And the games were amazing. UCLA hung in there with Southern Cal. Florida routed Florida State. Virginia took care of business against Virginia Tech to secure their spot in an ACC championship game. SMU and Cal, while not a rivalry game, came down to the very end with a spot in the ACC championship game on the line for SMU. So you know they were giving it everything they had. They came up short. Georgia Tech was a 1-score game. The Iron Bowl was an unbelievable game. We're going to talk about all of those. Michigan, or Ohio State rather, finally got over the hump and beat Michigan after 2019 was the last time Ohio State had won that game. Now, they didn't play in 2020, but still it's 4 years in a row. So just a ton of amazing football over the weekend. And we're going to talk about a lot of it today. But of course, we're going to focus at the beginning here on the list of losers. After that, I've got my updated Heisman list, and I think it's my final Heisman list too. So we'll talk about that. Talk about the best teams I saw play yesterday, or the biggest wins or best wins I saw yesterday. Not necessarily who I think are the best teams, but teams that won over this past weekend that I thought were the most impressive wins. Talk about that. We, of course, have the Josh PATE special, affectionately referred to as the Juice Poot special. And he might have to have a 2-hour show tonight anyway. A long list on the Josh PATE special today. The paper plate special, the We're Back list is updated. We've got it all right here on the Your Season is Over video. The only Sunday afternoon college football recap video that actually matters. That's right. There's a million other places you can go, and people will tell you how great your team looked, how good your quarterback was, how unbelievable your defense played. And that's just not what we do here. We spend the overwhelming majority of the time on this video talking about the exact opposite. You lost. You suck. You're terrible. Your season is over. Your quarterback is no good. Your coach needs to be fired. That's unfortunately what this video is. What order do we? I'm just going to go in the order I have them on the paper here. Georgia Tech loses to Georgia 16-9. That shouldn't be breaking news. The sun comes up in the east. It sets in the west. Death, taxes, and Georgia Tech losing to Georgia. They play every single year. Georgia Tech has won this game 3 times this century. That's it. Georgia is just a dominant team with better players, better coaches, better facilities, better fan base, better YouTubers too. Shout out to C-Dog and Rec Talk, though. Those are my buddies. But let's be real. Y'all aren't on my level. And neither is your football team. Unfortunately for you, you had to suffer another situation where you were this close. You know, I'm starting to enjoy these games where Georgia barely beats their rivals. And look, I get it. I'm a little greedy here, I guess, or I don't know. I've been lucky. I'll admit it. Okay. As a Georgia fan. However, I've been through the low times and let's be honest. And this applies to a lot of areas in life. If all you know is the highs, it's hard to appreciate the highs. And I'm here to tell you, I've been through the lows. I lived through the 90s. Florida beat the soul out of Georgia every single year. Hell, most of the 2000s too. I lived through that. And do you think the Florida fans felt sorry for me? No. Georgia Tech, believe it or not, I know this is hard to believe. Believe it or not, Georgia Tech was not just a better team, but a better football program than Georgia was in the late 80s and early 90s. I lived through that. You think the Georgia Tech fans felt sorry for me when they were busy winning half a national title in 1990? No, they didn't. And I don't feel sorry for them now. And I'm in the fortunate, lucky spot right now where my favorite team, Georgia, is absolutely dominating not just Georgia Tech, but all 3 of their rivals year in and year out. Georgia Tech, Florida, and Auburn. Beat them all this year. Beat them all last year. Beat them all in 23. Beat them all in 22. Beat them all in 21. Beat them all but one in 2020. It's just a remarkable run for me against my rivals. So it gets a little boring. Florida fans, those of you that lived through the 90s and the 2000s, didn't you get a little bored when you were beating Georgia 8, 9, 10 years in a row or whatever it was? It 14 out of 17 years you beat them or whatever that stat you like to bring up. Didn't it get a little boring sometimes? Even, I mean, I know you still enjoyed beating Georgia because it was your rival, but when you just do it over and over and over and over and over, it starts to lose a little of the excitement, doesn't it? That's kind of what I've been going through lately, beating Georgia Tech, Florida, and Auburn every single year. So now I'm at the point now where I'm like, if it's a close game and Georgia wins, like I actually like that more than a blowout because I know it hurts the opposing fan even more. And that's what Georgia Tech is feeling today. The same thing they were feeling last year when Georgia did the same thing. Not as bad as last year. Last year it went to 8 overtimes. Georgia Tech severely outplayed Georgia in the first half, had a lead, and then they kind of gave it away in the second half and went to overtime, and Georgia ends up winning in 8 overtimes. Like, that's brutal. This one wasn't that bad. Georgia was clearly the better team the entire game. But it was so close, though. 16-9. You just couldn't get in the end zone. Dang. Had to settle for 3 field goals. So I'm at the point now when it comes to my Georgia fanhood where it's more enjoyable for me to win a close game over Georgia Tech, Florida, or Auburn than it is to blow them out. Because I go into every game knowing Georgia's going to beat them because they beat them every year. So I like it when it's close in the fourth quarter because I know with 100% certainty that the Georgia Tech man was sitting on the edge of his seat. Not a nice seat like this one with fine Italian leather, hand stitched. Not like that. Probably sitting in a plastic lawn chair in his living room. But anyway, I know he was sitting on the edge of whatever chair he has cobbled together in his living room. And he was thinking in that fourth quarter, maybe they can do it. Hey, maybe they can't.
Did Brent cry? Did I say Brent cry? I'm sorry. Did Brent Key cry again after the loss to Georgia? Man, it hurts him so bad to lose to Georgia. It was a good game, but Georgia Tech offensively just didn't exist in this game. Now, to be fair, neither did Georgia offensively. So you want to laugh at Georgia a little bit. Their offense was horrific in this game. And shout out to Georgia Tech's defense for that. I thought Georgia Tech defensively played the best game they played all year, which was a shock to me. And it had to be a little bit of a shock to the Georgia Tech fans, too. Georgia Tech had given up 130 points in their last 3 games against juggernauts known as NC State, Boston College, and Pitt. And for the most part on Friday, they held Georgia's offense in check. Gunnar Stockton had the worst game of his career. And again, you got to at least give partial credit to Georgia Tech's defense for that, right? So I thought Georgia Tech defensively, like I said, played the best game of the year. Unfortunately, their offense played the worst. And, for all of Georgia Tech's problems, they were in the top 5 and top 10 of almost every offensive category on the planet. Points, yards, the whole deal. Didn't see any of that on Friday, though. Georgia defensively smothering on that Georgia Tech offense, and they were never able to get anything going. 260 total yards of offense for Georgia, so nothing to brag about there either. Georgia Tech only 250 yards of total offense. Each team had 1 turnover. Tech only 69 rushing yards and unable to score any touchdowns, had to settle for 3 field goals. Georgia ran the ball for 190. And honestly, that was kind of the difference in the game, particularly in the second half. Georgia, once it became evident that for whatever reason, credit to Georgia Tech's defense or Gunnar Stockton having an off day or offensive line issues or whatever you want to credit or blame it on, once Georgia realized, okay, we're not going to throw the ball, they kind of just the running game in the second half and kind of just put everything to sleep there. So Georgia Tech continues their tradition of losing to Georgia, and they did it again, 16-9. Georgia Tech, season is over, bud. Season is over. No playoffs, no ACC championship game. But hey, still the best regular season you've had that anybody can remember. So I guess that's something. Texas A&M. Welcome to the Your Season is Over wall. Your first appearance on there this year. That's right. 11-0 Texas A&M goes on the road to Austin, Texas, and gets their ass beat by the Shorthorn man. So whatever military parade they have disguising as a football team couldn't get the job done against Texas. And Marcel Reed looked bad in the second half of this one. I think he played himself out of the Heisman conversation in that game. So did Gunnar Stockton, by the way. Now, Gunnar Stockton was never going to win it, but I think Gunnar Stockton was 6th or 7th in the odds before this weekend or whatever. So if you were making a list of 7 or 8 Heisman possibilities, you would have had people like Marcel Reed and Gunnar Stockton on that list. Both of those names crossed off the list now. Terrible performances in rivalry games at the end of the season. Not a recipe generally for a Heisman invitation. But those 2 interceptions that Marcel Reed threw, he threw 2 interceptions on 2 consecutive offensive plays. Throws an interception. Texas A&M's defense forces a punt. They get the ball back. He throws an interception on the very first play of the next possession, and any chance Texas A&M had of coming back was gone. This was a weird game. 27-17, Texas gets the win. Texas won the second half of this game 24-7. It was 10-3 at halftime. A&M was winning. A&M was winning 10-3 at halftime, and then in the second half, it looked like 2 totally different teams. It was almost the exact opposite for Texas A&M as the South Carolina game. Remember the South Carolina game? They played terrible in the first half and then stormed back in the second half and won the game against South Carolina. This was the opposite. Played terrible in the second half of this one. Just couldn't get anything going offensively. Defensively, they had no answers for Texas. Arch Manning had another pretty good game. Here's some numbers here. Marcel Reed, I mentioned his 2 interceptions on consecutive plays in the fourth quarter that pretty much sealed the deal. He ended up 20 of 32 for 180 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He did have 71 rushing yards. And like most running quarterbacks, a lot of those yards came at critical times, third downs to extend drives and things like that. But he was never really able to break a long one, no rushing touchdowns, and never able to get anything going through the air. Texas pressured him all day in the pocket. He made some poor decisions, rushed some throws, missed some open receivers, and just didn't have a good day overall for your buddy Marcel Reed there. Yeah, I mentioned the 2 interceptions on back-to-back plays. Texas, 218 rushing yards. Texas A&M, 157. So both teams ran the ball well. 157 yards rushing in a conference game is pretty good for A&M there, but Texas, 218 rushing yards. The second half of this game in general, and specifically the late fourth quarter interceptions by Marcel Reed, seals the deal. And Texas wins their rivalry game for the second year in a row, renewed rivalry over Texas A&M. It's not enough for Texas to get into the playoffs. I guess we're going to have to deal with Texas fans all offseason in the same way that we had to deal with Alabama fans last offseason. Look, congratulations on your win, Texas. You salvaged what otherwise would have been a disastrous season, okay? But the reality is you lost to Florida, bud, and it wasn't really a competitive game. And then you go to Georgia and get blown out. Sarkisian can cry till he's blue in the face about the Ohio State game. Yeah, you lost. And I know you want to pretend like that didn't count, but it did. I can guarantee you, if Texas would have went on the road and beat Ohio State in week 1, Sarkisian would have been at that same podium after the game Friday night, pounding on it, saying, we need to be in the playoffs because we beat Ohio State in week 1. That was a good win for us. We deserve to be in because we beat Ohio State. You can't then turn around since you lost and want everybody to act like the game didn't matter. You just doesn't work that way. And I noticed you failed to mention your loss to Florida, which is a horrible loss. You got 3 losses. And look, there are 2 loss SEC teams that aren't going to get in this year. So you have less of a leg to stand on even than Alabama did last year. You know, because last year all the 2-loss teams got in out of the SEC. This year, that's not the case. Vabdu's not getting in either. And they're 10-2, a better record. I know you beat Vandy. I know that. But you don't have the same record. But they're not getting in either. You're not getting in. Enjoy the win over your rival. Okay? You can brag about that all offseason. Cup half full. Looks, anyway, to me, like Sarkisian's probably staying there. I think he needs to hire an offensive coordinator. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. Looks like Sark's staying. Arch Manning was way better in the month of November than he was in the month of September. So he did show significant improvement over the course of the season. He'll probably be back next year. I can't imagine he would go to the draft. Who would draft him? So, you know, you got some reasons to look forward to next year. And I really hope for the sanity and well-being of everybody else on the internet that that's what you focus on as a Texas fan starting now. And please do not turn yourself into Florida State fan from 2 years ago or Alabama fan from last year, where you spend the entire offseason holed up in a room filled with empty Kleenex boxes because you've been blowing your nose for 6 months from January to June about how you should have been in the playoffs. No, you shouldn't. You just shouldn't. Your resume does not support a playoff berth relative to the other 12, 13, 14 teams, whatever it is that are fighting for those same 12 spots. It just doesn't. Are you better than whatever group of 5 team is getting in? Yeah, but you know the rules. You know how the playoffs work. They're guaranteed a spot. Don't waste your breath with that. If you're going to get in the comments and tell me Texas should be in, you at least have to tell me then who should be out. What do you think you should be in over Oklahoma? No, they lost less games than you. They've got just as many good wins as you do. Yeah, you beat them head to head, but you've got more losses, okay? And by the way, they also scheduled a Big Ten opponent. Difference is they won their game and you didn't. That's the difference. They won their game against their Big Ten opponent. You lost. Sorry, it is what it is. You're not getting in. Please don't spend the entire offseason crying about it. Speaking of Michigan, boy, y'all could really use Connor Stallions. To be honest with you, I'm going to be dead. I don't even know if Connor Stallions can help Michigan right now. Their offense is so bad. And look, I'm going to give credit to Ohio State in a minute, but this is point and laugh, okay? Michigan's offense is pitiful. I am standing 10 toes down or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. I'm not changing my mind. I don't think Sharon Moore is the answer at head coach there. I don't. Congratulations for going 9-3, I guess. I don't think he's the answer there. That offense has been the worst I've ever seen 2 years in a row. And the Michigan fans will tell me, well, we won a natty with just a so-so offense. It's defense and running game. Well, then why did you go spend $100 bazillion gillion on Bryce Underwear? Just to go out here and run this same elementary ass middle school offense from 1992. Michigan runs the same plays I ran in Pee Wee football in 1989. If you're going to keep Sharon Moore, and if Bryce Underwear is going to stay at Michigan, which I don't think he should, Bryce, you should get the hell out of there, buddy. Bryce Underwear doesn't look a single bit better today than he did week 1. He just doesn't. Has he had a few good throws here and there? Has he had a couple of games where he completed a high percentage of passes? Yeah, here and there, sprinkled in and out. But there's no significant improvement over the course of the season for Bryce Underwear. He looked just as lost and deer in headlights yesterday as he did in week 1, week 3, week 5, week 7, whatever. If I was you, Bryce, I'd get out of there. I don't think Michigan can develop you. I don't. Now, I'm an idiot. I'm a 5-star dummy. I'm half retarded or 3/4, depending on who you ask. But I don't think you're going to develop there. And if you really do have high-level ceiling, potential elite sort of quarterback abilities, I would get the fuck out of Dodge if I was you. But if he stays, and if Sharon Moore is going to continue to be the head coach there, he has got to completely overhaul his offensive staff, and then he has to get the fuck out of the way and not have anything to do with it. And let somebody else come in there and completely bulldoze down to the ground and rebuild Michigan's offensive style, scheme, and philosophy from the ground up. Because it is unwatchable offensive football. And yes, you've got 2 good running backs. And yes, you were missing one of them. The good news there is, and you probably already know this, the Ohio State fans are going to be bragging for the next year that they beat you. And I think they did beat you. And I think that win counts. I think Ohio State beat you and it is what it is. You got to live with that. They won the game, you lost. That's what I think. But I'm a normal fucking college football fan. That's not what the Ohio State fan thinks. So Michigan man, you don't have to take no shit off the Ohio State fan for losing this game if you don't want to. Because Ohio State fans believe that if a player is injured during a game, especially if it's a significant offensive playmaker, and they then go on to lose that game, they think that loss doesn't count. So you don't have to take no shit from Ohio State fans if you don't want to. You can just tell them the win doesn't count. We were already on our backup running back, and then he got hurt in the first half. So the game doesn't count because that's what Ohio State fans believe. So I'll leave it up to you as a Michigan fan if you want to go down that rabbit hole or not. I think it's ridiculous. I think Ohio State won the game. I think injuries are part of football, and I think everybody has 105 scholarships for a reason. But again, I'm a normal college football fan. I'm not a 5-star dummy mouth breathing Velcro shoe wearing chin strap licking the window retard like your common Ohio State fan is. They think their own win didn't count because a player got injured during the game. Anyway, Ohio State finishes the regular season 12-0. They, of course, are headed to the Big Ten championship game to take on Indiana, who's also 12-0. We'll talk a little bit about them in a minute. That's probably the conference championship game, believe it or not, that I'm looking forward to the most. Big one in the SEC with Georgia and Bama, and we'll talk more about the conference championship. I got a segment on that coming up. But I think this is going to be a great game, Ohio State and Indiana. I'm leaning Ohio State, but I have a different view of Indiana now than I had this time last year. This time last year when it came to Indiana, I thought 2 things. Number one, they deserve to be in the playoffs. They're 11-1, Big Ten team. They deserve to be in. I wasn't somebody who said they shouldn't be in or you should put this team in instead of Indiana. I believed they deserved to be in the playoffs. That's number one. Number 2, I believe they didn't have a chance to win a single fucking game once they got there. And they didn't. This year, I think they are a legitimate top 5 team in the country. I think they're really good. I think Mendoza might be the best quarterback in the country. I think he might be better than Sayan. Now, Sayan's young and could get better than Mendoza eventually. But I mean, right now, and Ohio State's got the better outside weapon. I'm not getting into the breaking down the game. I'm not I'm not here to insult Sayin by saying that Mendoza is better. You're talking about two of the best quarterbacks in the country, Sayin and Mendoza. I think Mendoza might be the best quarterback in the country. I think Indiana is going to be a problem for anybody they play, including Ohio State. I'm leaning Ohio State. I'll make an official prediction later in the week when I do my prediction videos. But in other words, I'm a buyer on Indiana. So I'm excited for that game. Two 12-0 teams. We haven't seen them play yet this year. It's going to be a great game. The SEC got Georgia and Bama. We've seen that game. It's a rematch in Atlanta. Talk more about that game this week. Well, we'll get into the different conference championship games later on. But Michigan, your season is over. Ohio State, you're headed to the Big Ten championship game. Let me see what else I wrote down here on this Michigan-Ohio State game. Bryce Underwear, 8 of 18. 8 of 18? 63 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. Hey, he did manage to run for 1 yard, though. 1 yard he ran for. Unbelievable. Shout out to Bryce Underwear. Ohio State had 186 rushing yards. Sayin was 19 of 26, 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Hey, Ohio State fans, your butthole had to be clenched up. Michigan gets the ball, right, to start the game. They march right down the field, kick a field goal. They're up 3-0. You're thinking, okay, not ideal, but we held them to a field goal. Now, here comes that vaunted Ohio State offense, and this is the year. No more running between the tackles. We're opening this thing up. We're slinging it around. That's what we demand to see, right? Well, that's what you saw. Problem is, Julian Sayin threw it to the wrong fucking team. Interception. Michigan takes over in Ohio State territory. Marches right down to the red zone again. Kicks another field goal. You're up 6-0. It had to be, you had to be thinking, oh, holy fuck. The reason I know that is because Georgia has been in a similar situation against Alabama that you're in with Michigan. And the minute the Georgia-Alabama game starts, the first play of the game, Georgia could run for a 1 yard loss. And I'm like, oh, well, there it is. We're losing 100-0. They had to be going through your mind. The game could not have started any worse for Ohio State. The good news, and I said it at the time, this is bad that Michigan had to settle for these 2 field goals here. They could be up 14-0. Serious pressure on Ohio State, Ryan Day, Julian Sayin. Serious fucking pressure. Instead, they're only up 6-0, and Ohio State could have the lead in 1 play. And that's what ended up happening, of course. Ohio State absolutely dominated the entirety of the game from that point forward. Now, that first touchdown, that wasn't a touchdown. Come on, man. He was bobbling the ball when he crossed the goal line. He was still bobbling the ball when his foot touched out of bounds in the end zone. How they could review that and still get it wrong is beyond me. Now, that's not why Ohio State won the game at all. Ohio State was going to win that game yesterday, come hell or high water, and that's what they did. So it's not a thing where you go, well, if that wouldn't happen, Michigan would have won the game. No, they wouldn't. I just told you Bryce Underwear was 8 for 18 for 60. Come on. Michigan wasn't winning that game. So, but that was a bad call. So the Michigan fans are right. That was a terrible call. You still wouldn't have won the game, though. They dominated you. Dominated you. Dang. Ohio State improves to 1-4 over Michigan since COVID. So congratulations to Ohio State and Michigan. Your season is over. No playoffs for you. You'll be beating up on some SEC team again in the playoffs or in the bowl game, won't you? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Who's next? Auburn. Was this the game of the weekend? It was one of them. Auburn comes up short again. And to me, beyond, okay, the big story coming out of the game is Alabama won. That means they're in the SEC championship game and a guaranteed spot in the playoffs. That is obviously the headline coming out of the game. But shortly after that, though, to me, when I watch that game, it's Auburn finding another way to lose again. And they've made a habit out of it. And it becomes easy to blame an individual person, right? Blame Jackson Arnold, blame Hugh Freeze, blame Brian Harsin, blame Robbie Ashford before that. I blame Auburn. I blame Auburn. The school, the athletic department, the coaching staff, the players, the program as a whole. Auburn has become a losing program. It's a mentality. Winning is a mentality. It's contagious. but so is losing. And Auburn has developed a loser's mentality. They've developed a losing culture. You'll never get anybody to admit this, and I don't blame them. These are high-level athletes, high-level coaches we're talking about here. When games get tight in the second half, there's not a single Auburn player that expects to win the game. There's not one. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to go out there and try, and they do. And they tried yesterday, and they had their chances yesterday. But at no point when I was watching that game, we were streaming it, at no point did I think Auburn was going to win the game. I was waiting on Auburn to lose it. And that's exactly what they did. Before they had the turnover that actually ended the game, they fumbled. And there was a 4-play stretch where Auburn fumbled 3 fucking times. And I'm like, they don't know how to win. They're like actively trying to lose. Now, I don't think they were intentionally doing it. It's like just subconsciously, because they've lost so much for so long in so many different ways. They get in those situations, and subconsciously, I think they just, how are we going to blow this one? Well, let's fumble. Oh, shit. They reviewed it, and it wasn't a fumble. It was an incomplete pass. Oh, well, let's fumble on the next play then. Well, shit. An Auburn player jumped on the fumble instead of a Bama player. Fuck. All right, well, 2 plays later, let's fumble again. It was unbelievable to watch. It was unbelievable to watch. The officiating was a big story in the fourth quarter of that game. I thought the referees in general on both sides were a little too flag happy. But as far as specifically the 2 calls against Auburn on what ended up being Bama's game-winning drive. Number 1 was the pass interference calls, 3rd and long, whatever it was, around midfield, I guess. And it was an incomplete pass. Bama was 4th and long. They would have had to punt it away. They throw the flag, pass interference. When I saw it in real time, I didn't think it was pass interference. I was like, what? Pass interference? No way. No way. And they showed the replay. And the Auburn defensive back clearly had his hand over the back and around the shoulder of the Alabama wide receiver before the ball ever got there. So it was pass interference. Now, I think that was a very touchy call given where we were at in the game. It wasn't, in other words, it wasn't some sort of like blatantly obvious, like you see it and you go, oh, God, yeah, you just have to throw the flag there. That's one of those kind of referee discretion plays. I'm not saying it was the wrong call because he clearly got there early, but it was a touchy call. That gave Alabama yards and an automatic first down. Well, didn't they get down there 3rd and long again? About to have to kick maybe a field goal, it looks like. 3rd and long, they throw a pass, incomplete, into the end zone. 4th and long, gonna have to kick a field goal, go for it. Oh, here comes another flag. Another flag. Roughing the passer on Ty Simpson. This was a horrendous fucking call. This was a terrible, terrible call. It was a situation where Ty Simpson was standing in the pocket and the Auburn players were pushing on the Bama offensive lineman, and the offensive linemen were pushing on the Auburn players, and an Auburn player fell down got pushed down to the ground. A legal block, but pushed down to the ground by an Alabama offensive lineman. And he sort of, while on the ground after being pushed down by the Alabama man, fell down near Ty Simpson's legs and rolled into his leg. And they called a roughing the passer, not because the hit was late, but because he made contact with his legs. It was a terrible call. It's kind of like, if you didn't watch the game, it's kind of like, you know, when a team is punting the ball and the player calls fair catch, you can't run into him like before he catches the ball. You know what I'm saying? Or it's catcher interference. But sometimes when they run into him, it's because they're pushed into him by a blocker. It was like that, but on a pass play. And the Auburn guy just fell on the ground and rolled on top of Ty Simpson's foot or ankle or whatever it was, and the ref threw the flag. I thought that was a terrible fucking call. Terrible call, especially given the impact that call ended up making, which was another free 15 yards, another first down on 3rd and long instead of punting the ball or kicking a field goal was huge. Alabama goes on to score. So, of course, right on cue, you've got, it's rigged. Alabama pays the refs off, which I don't ever buy into that. I don't know how many times The refs are bad at their job. They were bad in the Georgia Tech game. They were bad in the Georgia Bama game. They were bad in the Oklahoma Auburn game. They were bad in every game, and not just in the SEC, across college football. They were bad last night in Southern Cal, UCLA, Virginia Tech, bad. South Carolina, Clemson. Refereeing was bad. The referees are bad at their job. But every time a call goes for or against whatever team, depending on somebody's preconceived notion, it's like, oh, well, so they must drop the bag, paid off the referees. All right, so Auburn gets the ball back, right? Now Auburn's sitting there on a 4th down, game on the line. They have to convert this 4th down or it's game over. Not enough time left on the clock if Alabama gets the ball back. Auburn drops back, throws, incomplete pass. Game over, right? Wrong. Referee throws a pass interference penalty against Bama. So right away to the comments, because I was live, so right away in the comments, I'm like, how did the conspiracy theorists explain that? Like, if Bama paid off the refs to win the game, all the referee has to do is not call that penalty and it's game over. But he called the penalty. Now, you might think it was pass interference. You might think it wasn't pass interference. Doesn't matter. Point is, referee threw the flag. Didn't have to. Doesn't ever have to throw the flag. Threw the flag against Bama when if he just would have kept his hands in his pockets, it would have been game over and Bama would have won. Now, if the referees were paid off, don't you think that's what he would have done? He would have just not thrown the flag. The referees are not paid off. They're just bad at their job. But, and I'm sure there are some Auburn fans running around blaming the refs for that loss. You have a losing mentality. You find more ways to, it's unbelievable how many ways Auburn find to lose games. Unbelievable. You just could, and look, I wrote some of the stats down. I'm not even going to go through them. The stats are pretty comparable. It's not like Auburn got dominated in this game. But the problem is when there needs to be a big play made and Auburn is on the field, they're not making it and the other team is. It's just that simple. You go back to the Oklahoma game and they're still complaining about a referee calling the second quarter of that game. There were 5, 6, 7 plays in the second half of that game that were must-have plays for Auburn, and they didn't make a single one of them. And Oklahoma did. Same thing with the Iron Bowl yesterday. Auburn had Bama backed up 3rd and 4th down. I can't tell you how many times, and they let Ty Simpson get loose and run for a 1st down. Or they let a running back catch the ball out in the flat behind the line of scrimmage, and he runs 11 yards for a 1st down on 3rd and 10. Just every single time Auburn needed to make a play, whether it was when they were on defense and they needed a stop or whether they were on offense and they needed a big conversion. If Auburn is on the field and a big play happens, it's for the other team and against Auburn every time. Auburn cannot make the plays when it counts and when it matters. And it's because they have developed a losing mentality and a losing culture. And now they got DJ Durkin in there and they thought that was going to be some sort of cure-all. Turns out, no, it's not. I guess Alex Golish is the cure-all now. I've got a thing on the coaches, all the coaches that have been hired coming up in a minute. But, of course, Kiffin to LSU, Summerall to Florida, Golish to Auburn. I got a thing on that coming up. But Auburn has some talented players. They're obviously lacking at the quarterback position, as well as Ashton Daniels played at times yesterday. He's not a legitimate starting quarterback in the SEC. He's just not. They need something there. Cam Coleman is good. They play good defensively. They don't have the it factor. And it's because they've got a losing culture there. And they need to. There are Auburn fans that wanted them to hire DJ Durkin. I don't think that would have been the right thing to do. You need to clean house there. You have to clean house, fresh slate for whoever comes in there. And then the boosters have to get the fuck out of the way. The boosters need to collect the money, give it to the coach or the athletic department or wherever like that, and then shut the fuck up and get out of the way. Will they do it? They haven't done it anytime in the last 40 years. We'll see. I know they won a natty in 2010, and they've had some good seasons here and there, but those boosters are a problem. Anyway, Auburn, season's over. Tennessee man, front and center, bud. Front and center. No way we're losing to Vandy. We own Vandy. Even in our down years, we beat Vandy. Not when you have Josh Heupel, bud. The thing with Tennessee is, even more so than the Auburn-Bama game, the Auburn-Bama game was close. Either team could have won that game. I know Bama fans are going to brag because they won the Iron Bowl, and you should. You should win. When you win your rivalry game, it doesn't matter how or the score. You should brag, so I get it. But those games were close. Georgia Tech lost, but it was close. You got absolutely destroyed. Here, Vandy put a worse beating on you than you put on Florida. So whatever gap you think exists between Tennessee and Florida as far as where they're at this year, the gap is bigger between Vandy and Tennessee. Pavia made you look dumb all day long. And I'm not a Pavia fan. He humiliated you. If it weren't for 2 interceptions that Pavia threw in the first half, this thing would have been 40-14 at halftime. Y'all's defense is really bad, and the fans know it. I've seen in my comment section and Twitter and everywhere else with the Fire Tim Banks speech and routine, which is hilarious. Of course, because I told you that 2 years ago when you got torched by South Carolina and all that, but you wanted to blame some make-believe Connor Stallions conspiracy for that. No. Same problem then. Same problem now. Come on, man. Listen to this. 45-24. Tennessee defense, absolute dog shit. Pavia, 268 yards, 1 touchdown through the air. He did have the 2 interceptions in the first half. Like I said, that's the only reason it wasn't 40-14 at halftime. They went up and down the field, track meet style. Pavia also ran for 165 yards and a touchdown. That's, goddamn. That's 430 yards almost of total offense for Pavia. Aguilar, 300 yards, a touchdown and an interception. So he played well, but he was sacked 4 times. So Vandy harassed you defensively. You think the Pavia thing is that Vandy ran the ball for 314 yards. How do you give up 314 yards rushing to a team? Maybe if it's a triple option team. But even then, players should just be better than a triple. 314 yards rushing. They big boyed you. They pushed you around. They bullied you. They stuffed you in a locker. All the stupid ass cliches, belt to ass. They did all of that. All of that overused shit. They did it all. And you only managed 83 yards rushing. I had people in my comment section yesterday asking me if Tennessee was soft. You believe that? I said, Josh Heupel's soft, like physically, like if you touch him, he's soft as shit. Motherfucker looks like a beanbag with legs. Yeah, boy, embarrassing loss for Tennessee. They end the season 8-4. Now, look, before Tennessee fans jump out of a window or, God forbid, they get on the fire Heupel train, let's back up for a second and let's take a look at where you are now in a down year compared to where you were in a down year pre-Heupel. 4 wins, 5 wins, no bowl game, sanctions, McDonald's bags, trash cans on the sideline. As bad as it was yesterday, and it was bad, you are miles above where you used to be not that long ago. Pre-Josh Heupel. So you need to try to keep that in mind. The defense is a massive problem and has been a problem for years under Josh Heupel, if you want to know the truth. I have been telling y'all about Banks and your defense for 3 or 4 years. You didn't want to hear it. You did have a decent defense last year. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a mirage. Picking out the best of something is just as dumb as picking out the worst of something. When a guy's been doing something for a long time, you can look over the course of it all and make a determination, good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. And it's been mostly bad defensively for Tennessee. That's just the reality. Last year, Tennessee defense, I feel like, was the exception to the rule. You got to do something over there defensively. Got to. Vandy just humiliated you in every way imaginable. Vandy's Pavia's brother? I've got questions about this. Pavia's brother, Diego Pavia, the quarterback for Vandy, is, of course, extremely obnoxious, as is his entire family. But he's got a brother that I guess is kind of like Patrick Mahomes' brother. Y'all know Jackson Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes has a brother, Jackson Mahomes, and he's all, he's coattails guy. He's clinging on to the coattails of Patrick Mahomes. Diego Pavia's got a brother that's doing the same thing. He's in the middle of everything. He's loud. He's obnoxious. The social media. He's sitting on the front row of the games, right behind him, in opposing stadiums, embarrassing himself. But I have a question about this. Now, he got arrested at the game yesterday for public intoxication. Now, I don't know the whole story. All right. So I'm not trolling him seriously. So that stadium holds 100,000 people. I've been to a lot of college football games, a lot. There are tens of thousands of people at every SEC game, every week, that are publicly intoxicated. So he must have done something. Now, like I said, I know he's obnoxious and mouthy. And so I'm giving, because here's what, I hope this isn't a situation where some Tennessee police just said, oh, that's that annoying fucking Poverty's brother up there. We're getting the shit beat out of us. Let's go arrest him for public drunkenness. I hope that's not what it was. I hope that's not what it was. I hope he did something that precipitated the arrest for public drunkenness. In other words, that he wasn't just like, well, let's just go give him a hard time type of thing. So let me know, because like I said, I'm sure there's more to the story. I just don't know it. Was he yelling slurs? Was he cussing at people? Was he making a commotion? Was he threatening to fight people? Like, what was it that got the cops' attention in the first place with his brother? Please tell me they didn't look around that stadium at 100,000 people and randomly pick him out as somebody that happened to be publicly drunk. Again, I've been to a lot of college football games in the SEC. There are tens of thousands of people at every single SEC college football game that are publicly drunk. So something else must have happened, because I refuse to believe that the police just went over there and harassed him just because he's Pavia's brother. But let me know if there's more to the story. But Tennessee, your season is over. SMU, your season is over. And this is embarrassing. Cal is not a good team. And this is not a rivalry game. So, you can understand Alabama, the voodoo of Jordan Hare, whatever. You end up being a close game in the fourth quarter, one-score game. Georgia Tech rivalry game ends up being a one-score game. Clemson and South Carolina was a 6-point game with 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter until Clemson intercepted that ball there at the end. So you get all that, okay? You get all that. SMU is playing a terrible Cal team. It's not a rival. And SMU is in a situation where if we win, we go to the ACC championship game. If we lose, we don't. And they got beat by Cal. Now, it ended up being a great game. Cal led most of the game. In fact, they had a significant lead for large portions of the game. SMU mounts a comeback in the fourth quarter. They end up taking the lead late with a minute and a half to go, 2 minutes to go. They scored a touchdown to take a lead, 3-point, 4-point lead, whatever it was. Cal came out and went right down the fucking field on that SMU defense and scored the winning touchdown and ends up winning the game. What was it, 38-35? 38-35. So, bad loss. It's not a rival. You can't blame it on that. You had everything to play for, SMU. Cal had nothing to play for. This isn't a rival. This isn't a thing where Cal goes, we got to win this game for recruiting, in-state recruiting, or we don't want to lose to our rival. It was a nothing game for Cal, a bad team. And you had everything to play for, and you blew it. Absolutely blew it. And this isn't even an East Coast, West Coast travel situation. SMU's in Texas. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a short distance by any means, but it's not like having to travel from Miami to Cal or Pitt to Cal. Texas to Cal. You're 3 or 4 states away. I mean, that's about like traveling from Georgia to Texas to play the Longhorns or whatever. So you don't even have that excuse to use. You just got beat, and now you're out. And you've left the ACC in a bad way, bud, because we're looking at an ACC title game now. Virginia versus Duke. Yeah, Duke. 7-5 Duke is in the ACC title game. 7-5 Duke, who has lost to not one, but two group of five teams this year. That Duke is in the ACC title game. And if Duke beats Virginia, the ACC is getting left out of the playoffs unless Miami gets in as an at-large. But, the five highest ranked conference champions is who makes are the guaranteed spots, not automatically the Power 4 plus 1. It's just the five highest ranked conference champions. And we all assumed it would be the Power 4 plus 1, most likely Tulane or North Texas, whoever wins that conference championship game. And then James Madison would be sort of the oddball out from the G5. But I'm telling you, if Duke beats Virginia and the ACC champion is 8-5 with two group of five losses, and James Madison is 12-1, James Madison will get that last playoff spot, not Duke. And the ACC then would be left out of the college football playoff unless somehow Miami gets in as an at-large. And y'all know my thoughts on that. If Notre Dame is in, Miami should be in. They should be ranked. Wherever you put Notre Dame, you should have Miami one spot. So this isn't an anti-ACC thing. This is just a reality thing. If Duke wins the ACC conference champion is not getting in the playoffs. It'll be James Madison and the winner of Tulane and North Texas. SMU, your season is over. Florida State and Florida. The Dead Program Bowl. It's just two teams that gave up on football. It was a sad, sad thing to watch on TV. Florida beat the just life out of them. 40-21. Castellano, 17 of 28, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. DJ Wu, 15 of 24, 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. Lone bright spot here, Jaden Ball. You know what's funny? One of the big talking points about firing Napier over the last year or so has been, well, if we fire Napier, what if we lose Lagway? Who gives a shit if there's 100 Lagways. There's 50 in the portal every year. Here's nothing special. There ain't 100 balls. That's who you better hope you don't lose. That's who you better hope you don't lose him. He is by far your best offensive player. It's not even close. I like some of your young wide receivers, but because you got Lagway, that's like liking Cam Coleman at Auburn. Yeah, I love Cam Coleman. I'm sure he's great. If he ever has somebody that knows how to throw the football, so far he's been in college for 2 years, and it's a waste, Cam Coleman. Lagway's a waste of a quarter. The guy no good. But Ball is 266 yards rushing for Ball yesterday. Florida only had 272 as a team. I say only 272. That's a ton of rushing yards. What I mean is, of the 272 rushing yards he had, 266 was Ball. He had all but 11 of the rushing. Florida ran for 276 yards. All but 11 of those yards were by Ball. Unbelievable performance by him. Unbelievable. Florida State had 167 yards rushing, which isn't terrible, but over half of those were by Castellanos. So Florida State, man, I'm not even going to make fun of Florida. They won the game. Florida State is horrifically bad. Look, we've known this. We've talked about it for a while. There's a difference between having a bad team and being a bad program. And I'll give you an example. Ohio State. If Ohio State went 9-3 next season, that'd be a bad Ohio State team, right? Nobody would be running around going, boy, hey, a terrible fucking program. What? Why? Because they averaged 12 wins a year, and then out of the blue, they had one 9-3 season, and they go right back to winning 11. Or Georgia. If Georgia were to go 7-5 next year, you go, wow, that's a bad Georgia team. No one would be sitting around going, boy, Georgia's got a terrible football program. So there's a difference between having a bad team and having a bad program. Florida State's a bad fucking program. Now, the team is bad. That's also true. But the team has been bad. In fact, it's been really bad. 4 of the last 6 years, they've had losing seasons. And all 6 years, the same head coach, Mike Norvell. And Florida State comes out, waves an FSU flag, and tells you they're keeping him again for a 7th year. This is Kentucky level of, what are you doing? Who in their right mind would put up with this at Florida fucking State. And there is no light at the end of the Mike Norvell tunnel because it's not like he's some elite recruiter. I'm going to use Clemson as an example. Now, Clemson is in no way like Florida State. Clemson had a bad year. It's not a bad program. Dabo's got his issues. Needs to address some of that with portal and NIL and things. But like Clemson's a good program. Where, Florida State is not. But like, when you look at Clemson this year, the reason everybody was so high on Clemson this year was because they had built a roster, and it was peaking this year. They had a ton of defensive talent. There was upperclassmen. Cade Klubnik was in his third year as a starter. There was just a lot of like building momentum towards this year. You look at Florida State, that doesn't exist. Mike Norvell's been there 6 years. He doesn't have a single quarterback on his roster that he's recruited, signed, developed, and is ready to play football. Not one. This guy's supposed to be an offensive genius and a quarterback guru. So you're stuck with Mike Norvell next year. That's bad enough. To make it matters worse, you don't even have anything to point to in terms of it was bad. It was a bad year. But, we had a top 5 recruiting class 2 years ago. They'll all be juniors this year. This is the year coming up, 2026. You don't even have that. This guy's going to give up on recruiting Deion Sanders. I mean, he's basically the Deion Sanders of Florida. It turns the roster over every single year through the portal. No future plan, short-term or long-term. Everything is immediate. Oh, season ends, go get a new everybody, bring them in. And then what happens? You lose 2 or 3 games like you did this year in September, and nobody gives a fuck. The team gives up. They're not there for Florida State. They're not there for Mike Norvell. They're not there for the Florida State fans. They're not there because they grew up loving Florida State. They're not there because they're from Florida. They're there because they weren't good enough to play where they were at, and Florida State offered them a bigger check than somebody else did. They're mercenaries. And as soon as things start to go bad, there is no rallying the troops. Let's win one for Florida State. We're a proud program with a proud tradition. They don't even know who the fuck Bobby Bowden is, nor do they care. They don't fucking care. They're mercenaries. And next year's Florida State team, guess what? Mercenaries. Just a different group of them. Because there's no plan. Mike Norvell has no plan. They are bad. They are so bad. And they got obliterated by a really bad Florida team. Georgia Tech loses to Georgia by a touchdown. Auburn loses to Bama by a touchdown. The Clemson-South Carolina game was close. There were other blowouts. I'm not trying to pretend this was the only blowout. But then you look at the Florida State game. And Florida State, it looked like teams that were in 2 different leagues. Like it looked like high school playing middle school, or Ohio State playing an FCS school. It just looks like Florida State doesn't even belong. And it's because the minute things start to go bad at Florida State, there's no leadership. There's no veteran presence on that team. There's nobody who's sort of been through the 3-year grind at Florida State that can stand up in that locker room and go, what is going on here? Because they don't care. And neither does the administration, because they're bringing back Mike Norvell. Florida State, your season is over. All right, let's talk about some of the other games yesterday, just real quick. Indiana continues to roll 56-3. They are a legitimately good team. This is not last year's Indiana team. This is not a team where you can go, well, they'll get in the playoffs, but they're not beating anybody. Yeah, they're a problem for anybody they play. Unbelievable game, again, 56-3 over Purdue. I know Purdue's bad. Okay, but 56-3, and they do it every week to everybody they play. Ole Miss won the Egg Bowl in what turned out to be Lane Kiffin's last game. I uploaded an entire Lane Kiffin video earlier today. You can click back and watch it. 38-19, Ole Miss beats Mississippi State. Utah come from behind, win over Kansas 31-21. Arizona beat in-state rival Arizona State. Arizona State technically still had a chance to make the Big 12 title game when that game was played. By the time it was over, they didn't, because they lost. Sam Levitt, of course, already announced he's entering the portal for next year. Texas Tech 49-0 over West Virginia. Worst home loss for West Virginia since like 1949. God. They got Rich Rod back in there, and I said when they hired him, I'm going to give him a year, because it was never going to be good this year for West Virginia. It just wasn't. But boy, 4-8. They did beat Pitt, but beyond that, which was in week 2, I think, just absolutely nothing from West Virginia this year. You better get it turned around next year. Oregon beats Washington 26-14. They're headed to the playoffs. Oklahoma hangs on, comes from behind late in the game, and beats LSU. And this was huge because Oklahoma with 2 losses would have been eliminated for sure had they lost this game to LSU. They didn't play well offensively. But to be fair, Oklahoma, they haven't played well offensively all year. That defense keeps them in the game. And unlike Auburn, look, Oklahoma and Auburn are very similar teams. Their records are nowhere near similar. Unlike Auburn, who we talked about earlier, when Oklahoma gets in the fourth quarter of these games, guess what they expect to do? Win. And more times than not, that's what they do. In fact, they did it 10 times this year. They're 10-2 and they're headed to the playoffs. Auburn busy welcoming yet another new head coach. Dang. Hate to hear that. I really do. Notre Dame 49-20 over Stanford. BYU 41-21 over UCF. They're a bubble team. Miami 38-7 over Pitt. They beat Pitt worse than Notre Dame did. In fact, Miami and Notre Dame have not one but 4 common opponents this year. Now, first of all, it's ridiculous that we even have to talk about this. Notre Dame and Miami's common opponents. We should be able to just go, oh, they have the same record. Miami beat them. Oh, okay. Yeah, Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame then. That's obvious, right? But for whatever reason, people are ignoring that. So what about common opponents? Well, Miami and Notre Dame have not one but 4 common opponents this year. Miami beat those 4 common opponents worse than Notre Dame did. 3 of the 4. Miami beat 3 of those 4 common opponents worse than Notre Dame did. Dang. Southern Cal 29-10 over UCLA. Virginia 27-7 over Virginia Tech. Tulane headed to a conference championship game, but they got no coach. 27-0 over Charlotte. Clemson beat South Carolina 28-14. It was 20-14 with 2 minutes to go in the game, and South Carolina imploded with turnovers on back-to-back possessions to end that game. Duke 49-32 over Wake, somehow going to the ACC championship game at 7-5. Duke is, with 2 group of 5 losses. Holy shit. NC State beat Bill Belichick 42-19. Terrible season for Bill Belichick in North Carolina. Kansas State over Colorado 24-14. Colorado finishes the season 3-9. Deion said in the post-game press conference he'll be back next year. We'll see. Iowa State 20-13 over Oklahoma State. A little close for comfort there with a 1-win Oak State team. Oklahoma State finishes the season 1-11. Boy. They hired Eric Morris, by the way, be their new head coach. Penn State 40-36 over Rutgers. Penn State gets to 6 wins, so they will be bowl eligible. All right, best teams I saw play this weekend. I got 2 teams. Actually, not really the best teams I saw play. These were the 2 wins I thought were like, okay, that's an impressive win for one reason or another. Number 1, Ohio State. First off, they dominated the game. They ran the ball well. They showed they could throw it on Michigan when they wanted to and when they needed to. I thought they controlled the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for the most part. There were a couple of drives that Michigan looked pretty good, but overall course of the game, there were a few battles, I think, that Michigan won. Ohio State won the overall war when it came to the line of scrimmage, which I know is important to Ryan Day and that team, and they dominated. They got the monkey off their back, or whatever expression you want to use. They finally found a way to beat Michigan, so I think that was one of the best wins we saw. The other one is Vandy. You know, people writing Vandy off. They're not going to beat Tennessee. No point in talking about Vandy in the playoffs. They won't win. You know, Tennessee beats them every year. Plus, it's in Knoxville and blah, blah, blah. Beat the absolute soul out of them. Beat the soul out of them. A lot of people, Vandy should be in the playoffs. I'm not automatically disagreeing with you, but here's the problem. When you tell me Vandy should be in, you got to tell me then who should be out. Like Vandy should be in instead of who? Bama? Well, Bama beat them, and they got the same record. Oklahoma? In other words, you can't just say Vandy should be in and put them in. There's no room. So if you put them in, you got to take somebody out. That's the problem. I'm not saying that Vandy doesn't deserve to be considered for a playoff spot. They do. So does Miami. So does BYU. So does Notre Dame. but only one of them can get in. Most out of that group, most likely only one can get in. So it's not as simple as just going, well, Vandy went 10-2, they should be in. Okay, who are you taking out? You got to, so that's where it gets a lot more difficult. But that was a great win for Vandy. Paper plate special, a lot of them today. SMU, everything to play for, and you lose to a terrible Cal team. It's not a rivalry game. Cal had nothing to play for, and you dribbled down your leg. Took the lead late after falling. They put themselves in a massive hole. They come all the way back. They take the lead with a minute to go. You're thinking, oh, wow, they're going to hang on, punch their ticket to the ACC championship game. No, defense comes out on the field and lets Cal go right down and score to win the game. Paper plate special. The refs are on the paper plate special again. The Auburn-Alabama game obviously sticks out, but there were multiple calls in multiple games where you just go, what are they doing? The touchdown in the Ohio State game, that just was not a touchdown. He was bobbling the ball both when he crossed the goal line and when he stepped out of bounds in the end zone. Should have been a touchback, should have been Michigan's ball. It's not the reason they lost. It's just another example of a terrible call by referees that don't know what they're doing. There were targeting calls that I still every week they're targeting. I can't even say it's whether it is or isn't targeting. So I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with any particular targeting call because I don't know what targeting is anymore. What I do know is a hit that they call targeting in one game, that same exact hit could happen in another game being played somewhere else and it wouldn't be called. So it's just, they got to do away with the throwing people out of the game for targeting because it's too inconsistent with how it's called and it creates too big of a possible negative impact on a team to have to lose somebody like that. So they have to keep targeting as a penalty. I understand that, but we've had it long enough now. I think we need to get rid of throwing people out of the game for targeting. It's becoming too big of a problem. The Tennessee defense, paper plate special. Holy shit, it doesn't even exist. You don't need a plate. There's nothing to put on it. When you want to talk about Tennessee and the paper plate special, you don't need a plate. There is no Tennessee defense. Wow, it's really bad. The Florida coaching search, paper plate special. Lane Kiffin or bust. That's it. It's all we want for a year. We're telling you that 1 year. We're getting Lane Kiffin. It's a done deal. Done deal. It's been a done deal every day for the last 6 weeks, according to Florida fans in my comments. Like, done deal. Just wait, Lou. Just wait. Check your phone on Sunday, Lou. For the last 3 Sundays, by the way. And then Florida comes out at the last minute and says, we're tired of waiting. We're going to go get somebody else. And it was fucking G5 Johnny. Fucking John Sumrall. Good luck, Sumrall. I think Sumrall's a good coach at Tulane. Just like everybody thought, and they were right, that Napier was a good coach at Louisiana in the group of 5. You needed a home run hire here. It's just too much of the same old shit with Florida. Rinse and repeat routine. You keep trying the same thing. And it's not working. And that's why I think it was so important to Florida fans that they bring in somebody with big-time head coaching experience. And so they, of course, targeted Lane Kiffin. But now here you are, yet again, hiring another group of 5 guy. Because it worked out so well with McElwain and Napier. We'll see. Marcel Reed played himself out of the Heisman. Didn't have a great game anyway. And then with the game on the line there in the fourth quarter, he throws not 1, but 2 interceptions on not only on back-to-back possessions, back-to-back plays, throws an interception in the red zone. Texas gets the ball. A&M forces them to punt. A&M gets the ball back. He throws an interception on the very next play. It's just bad. Bad. I'm not going to pile on to them too bad. They're headed to the playoffs still, but A&M keeps their streak of never making the SEC championship game alive. They still have never made it to the SEC championship game. Had a chance to do it with a win against Texas. Couldn't get it done, but they are headed to the playoffs. What else is on here? Well, the Heisman. I think Jeremiah Love should win the Heisman. I think he's the best player in football. He doesn't have... I think he's got about 1,300 yards rushing or something. So it's not one of these like all-time great numbers years, but my God, he's good. If you just watch him play, the guy is so good. I think he should win the Heisman. I think the finalists are going to be Jeremiah Love, Mendoza at Indiana, Sayin from Ohio State, and Pavia from Vandy. I think those will be your 4 Heisman finalists. I'm casting my hat into the ring for Jeremiah Love. We're back list. Texas A&M is number 1. They're the only team on the list right now that's definitely headed to the playoffs. There's an outside chance that Miami gets in. In fact, I think they are going to get in. I think when the final rankings come out, not the ones this week, but the ones next week after Conference Championship Sunday, I think the committee is going to sit in that room, and I do not think they're going to be able to issue a final ranking that has Notre Dame over Miami. So I actually think Miami is going to end up getting into the playoffs, and Notre Dame is not. But I've got Miami 2 and Texas A&M 1. Third is Tennessee. They had the best season of the remaining teams on the list, but of course, not playing in the SEC championship game, and they're not making the playoffs, so they cannot get off this list. They'll be on it next year for sure. Same with Auburn at 4, Nebraska at 5, and Florida at 6. The Josh Pate special. I think he's going to talk about Miami to the playoffs too. Miami fans need to be held and coddled right now. They're nervous, they're mad, and they have every right to be. I think Josh Pate will tell you all about it tonight. Texas to the playoffs. I think Josh Pate's going to show you his stupid fucking JP poll that power rates teams, and it's probably going to have Texas at 6 or 7 or something. And he's going to tell the Texas fans, oh, yeah, you should be in the playoffs. Subscribe to my channel. Tell all your friends. I only say good things about every team. You should be in. No, you shouldn't be in, man. You lost 3 games, and one of them was a bad loss to Florida. Another one was a blowout loss to Georgia. There's not enough there when it comes to Texas at 9-3 to put them in. I'm sorry. I have to tell the truth. I don't have the ability to lie. But Josh Pate will go over to his channel tonight, Texas. He'll tell you should be in. Same thing with Vandy, by the way. Same exact song and dance there. He'll tell you that you should be in. And then even though he's going to talk about Miami being in the playoffs, I think he's going to bookend that by also talking about Notre Dame should be in the playoffs too, even though he knows like both of those things can't happen. He's so afraid he's going to make a fan base mad. It's the funniest thing to me to watch him sort of, twist himself into knots trying to compliment one team while not talking bad about another, or not even talking bad, just he's so afraid to say anything that's gonna make a fan base mad or that they might not want to hear. It's just the funniest damn thing to me. Anyway, there's that. All right, conference championship games. In the SEC, we've got Georgia versus Bama. Who do you think's favored? Of course, Georgia's favored. Georgia's favored by 1.5. The ACC, Virginia versus Duke. Who do you think's favored? Virginia. They blew Duke out a couple of weeks ago, but they're only favored here by 2.5. Big 12, Texas Tech and BYU, another rematch. Texas Tech favored by 13.5 in that one. The Big 10, Ohio State and Indiana. Who do you think's favored and by how much? Ohio State is favored by 5.5. Then, of course, you've got North Texas and Tulane, and the winner will most likely get in. North Texas is the favorite. In that one, they're favored by 2.5. Florida has hired Sumrall. These are all official as of today. Florida has hired Sumrall. Arkansas has hired Silverfield, the Memphis coach. Auburn has hired Golish. LSU has hired Kiffin. Virginia Tech, of course, hired Franklin. We knew that. And Oklahoma State has hired Eric Morris. We knew that. I'm going to rank these just off the top of my head. I think the best hire is James Franklin at Virginia Tech for a couple of reasons. He's a proven winner. Not a national title winner, but he's a proven winner at multiple schools, 2 different Power 4 schools. And at Virginia Tech, he will have an easier schedule every single year than he ever had at Vandy or Penn State. I think that's the best hire. 2, LSU and Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin might be the best head coach of these 6 that we're talking about right now. LSU's got kind of a messy situation, though, and he's created a little bit of a negative atmosphere for himself with the way it ended up all going down at Ole Miss. I'm curious to see how it will work for Lane at LSU. That's why I have him 2 behind Franklin at 1. 3, Golish at Auburn. I think Golish has a great offensive mind. And I think if they can keep Deuce Knight, the quarterback there, that 5-star, he didn't play 1 snap yesterday against Bama, by the way. I think the combination of Golish and Deuce Knight will be interesting to me. I've got him as the 3rd best hire. 4th best hire is Eric Morris at Oklahoma State. I like this guy. I like this guy. Now, I don't know what he's going to do in the Big 12. I don't know what he's going to do at Oklahoma State, but I like him. I think that has a chance to be a good hire. Got him at 4. 5, I've got Summerall at Florida. Now, look, I think Summerall's a good coach. People that are way smarter than me when it comes to college football think he's a good coach. He's been a hot name for a couple of off seasons in a row. It was just a matter of time before somebody hired him. All of that is true. I have him at 5th on my list because Florida fans have been telling me for a year, Lou, it's Lane Kiffin or bust. It's Lane Kiffin or bust. Well, I'm looking again. It ain't Lane Kiffin, so it must be bust. So I've got him at 5. I've got Silverfield 6 at Arkansas purely because I don't like that motherfucker. Because he ran his mouth for no fucking reason at Memphis about shit that he didn't have nothing to do with. Shit that was above his pay grade. Out of his league. And he's going to find out how far out of his league it was. Because now he's in the SEC. I don't know what Arkansas is going to do next year, but I'm going to beat the shit out of them. Have a great day.